Hi everyone, I'm back here with the start of what I hope is going to be a new series where I look into individual songs in depth from the Leppard back catalogue. I've been meaning to try and do something like this for a long time because I've always really liked doing the analysis style videos, and I've been wanting to do more tutorial content as well. So I'm hoping this is something which can combine those two things. So the format of these videos, it could change over time, but I'm mainly going to be looking at stuff like a little bit of background on the song, interesting facts about it. Gonna be doing like 3 types of tutorials, one for beginners, one for intermediates, and then one for advanced players. And then I'll be doing some analysis in between those sections as well. So looking at production, guitars, recording techniques, music theory. So just what the song dictates basically. And in terms of what songs I'm going to be doing, I'd like to cover every song from High and Dry to Adrenalize, and then pick the odd song either side of those albums as well, which kind of work. But I'll mainly be leaving up to you guys what you want to see. I've been asked to do more High and Dry content, so the first 2 or 3 of these videos will be on High and Dry. Then after that we can see what works. So this first one is of course on Let It Go, which is the first track from High and Dry, and also the lead single, although I don't think it did too much in the charts. The song's credited to Willis, Clark and Elliott. And since the names are not in alphabetical order, you can maybe assume that Pete came up with the main riff and then the bridge sections could be Steve's or something like that. I had to look up some vinyl pictures just to double check those writing credits because unfortunately they're not on my CD version of the album. In fact, there's not much liner notes in this version at all, which is a shame because I always like reading the liner notes. But this does have Me and My Wine, so it's not all bad. So, any interesting song facts? Well, yes, this song was originally called When the Rain Falls, and we'll have a look at how much of that track was changed to what we know in Let It Go a little later on. Now, it's also, according to Setlist FM, which might not be the most reliable source, but it's also the 12th most played song by the band live, just ahead of Switch and just behind Let's Get Rocked, which is pretty interesting. Somehow this is made in the top 20. Well, I know how it's made in the top 20, but it shouldn't be there. Anyway, so I was a little surprised that Let It Go was as high up on the ranking. But then I thought, well, I guess it makes sense when, it had one tour kind of head start over some of the other songs in the top 20. But looking into these questionable statistics even further, I'm even more impressed as it looks like the song was completely dropped for a full decade in the 90s. But it has seemed to enjoy quite a steady resurgence in the noughties, and I do believe I saw a video of it being played at the recent Vegas residency as well, which would be in the last week or so. So with the track having been played by all former and current guitarists in the band, it's varied slightly on who played what. So if we just stick with the solos, and if I go by what the official video shows us, you had Steve on the main solo. Then you had Steve again on like the lead lines in the last chorus, and then Pete would take that kind of little ending part. Now, when Phil joined the band, it was pretty much a straight swap. He would just play what Pete would play. However, when Viv joined the band, the main solo was split into 2. Viv would play the first half, Phil would play the second. Now, I'm hoping with most of these videos I can gather some quotes from the band on the songs. Luckily for this one, I have a quote from Steve, which must have been like the very first kind of Def Leppard tab book or tutorial book. I got this as like a collector's piece because, well, even if I did need it for tab, it wouldn't be very helpful. It's not very good. A lot of it's like wrong, but it does feature a cool interview with Phil and Steve at the start, and they talk about each song from Pyromania and High and Dry. So Steve has this to say about the song. He says, "It's a little more straightforward than anything we did on Pyromania, but it's got some subtle things happening in it to make more of the song. On the A section on the first go-around is one open note, then the section is played staccato. Then the next time there's another rhythmic variation, but it's always the same note. So we play it with a slightly different feel each time around to keep it from getting boring. The song has become a standard for us live." Now we'll look into what Steve was meaning here shortly, as it's the section I'm going to be looking at on the beginner's tutorial. But if you want to check out the full interview, there's a transcription of it on the Steve Clark Guitar website, and I'll put a link in the description. Now I've got a quote from Joe as well on the song, which I've got from the 2015 self-titled album Fan Pack magazine. which is a really good magazine. There's a lot of quality stuff in there. But I managed to get a quote on, well, he's talking about when the rain falls. He pretty much has this to say: "Much saw it as our highway to hell, but the words were all wishy-washy bollocks. Me stuck in my parents' house 'cause it's raining. Mutt said, we've got to go more global. So we thought more of Queen's We Will Rock You and renamed it Let It Go." Right, so here's a tutorial for any beginners out there. So when I first started trying to play the guitar, naturally I just used to try and learn Def Leppard songs. And obviously, I couldn't play them all right away. But I always found there were riffs in there that were simple enough to kind of get me started, and they helped motivate me to play. And of course, the more you play, the better you get. So I'm hoping with this section I can encourage people who are maybe just starting out, or if you're finding it's a bit too tough, that there are really cool riffs to play in these Def Leppard songs that like I say, are simple enough to get started, and it's just enjoyable to play, and the more you play, the better you get, because it can be quite a frustrating thing just starting out. But hopefully I can help out here. The section I've transcribed here is the verse part, or the A section, as Steve alluded to. And there's a tab I've made here, so you can see we're just playing 4 chords. Now if you're new to tab or tablature, basically each line represents a string on the guitar. The bottom string is the low E string. Now with any kind of relation to guitar, if I'm to say high or low, or bottom or top, it's always going to be in relation to pitch. And that's the way you should try and think about it as well. So the lowest string is the lowest in pitch. The highest string is the highest in pitch. Same with the frets as well. The open, or the 0, means an open string. And then as you go up in the numbers, you go up the fretboard, you go up in pitch. It's the same if I was to say I'm going up the neck, I'm going up in pitch. I'm going down the neck, I'm going down in pitch. I'm going up a string, I'm going down a string. So this kind of helps keep it consistent with relation to the language I'm going to be using here. So these are the 4 chords we're looking at. Should sound something like this. So even though this may seem very basic, you can actually learn quite a lot from this progression. First off, your left hand, how to finger these chords. Basically what I'd say is just do what comes naturally to you first, and then just try each and every variation you can come up with. This kind of helps you find what's comfortable for you. But if you notice what I'm doing here, I'm just using my first finger for that 2nd fret of the D, and we have the open A. For the next one, I think I'd naturally like to use 2 fingers. For the 3rd one, I use my 1st and 3rd finger. And then for the 4th one, I kind of bar my 1st finger over those 2 7th fretted notes. Of course, there's right hand techniques as well we're going to be looking at. It's we're only hitting 2 strings out of 6, so you want to make sure you are hitting the right strings. And it's not always the same 2 strings we're hitting, so you want to get used to how it feels in your hand, to know that if I'm hitting a low string, my thumb's going to be up here, or if I'm hitting a higher string, you kind of rest it down there. This will all come more naturally over time. You just got to get stuck in and start playing and get your fingers used to it. So yeah, just try and play these chords, take it slow. Then once you feel comfortable, then try play along with the CD as well, see if you can get up to speed. And then you can maybe try the 2nd variation, which is what Steve was talking about when he said, they'd play this part different each time to kind of stop it being boring. The 2nd time round, we introduce an open A string with a palm mute. A palm mute, basically using this part of our palm, we're going to rest on the strings as close to the bridge or the end of the string here as we can, because that gives us the muted sound without completely muting it. If we rest our palm up here, we don't get any kind of sustain. Bring it back down here, we get this sound. So it's quite a simple enough one to pick up on. If you're an advanced player and you think this is too simple for me, well, you could maybe try something like this. What I like to try and do as a fun exercise is, even with a simple 2-note chord, instead of trying to be accurate and only hitting those two strings, I'll hit every string and I'll just use it as a test to see if I've got a good enough technique on my left hand to meet all the other strings. So I'm just basically using the flesh of my other fingers here to meet all the other strings. So that's something you can try if you're an advanced player. So another great thing about this little section here is that it introduces us to chord shapes that we'll find in a lot of Def Leppard songs, you know, especially in the Steve Clark era. I like to call them like different chord voicings, because it's like a different way to voice the chord. But they can also be referred to as like inversions or like parts of chords. And let me try and briefly explain what I mean. So take that second chord. Most commonly in rock, you'd see it like this. And this is a power chord, so we've got 3 on the A string and 5 on the D string. But what we're doing here in Let It Go is we're using the inversion of that. So we're taking that low C note and we're just going to be playing the octave above. So it's a C note again, but it's a higher one. This just kind of gives it a different sound. So that's what we call an inversion. We're playing the same notes, but in a different order, basically. If you want to think of it like a broken chord or a part of a chord, you can think of it as like, if I was to take just a C major chord, you can see that those 2 notes fall within that chord. They are a part of that chord. So over time, you'll begin to kind of hear and see how certain parts of chords are used in certain situations, and they give like different kind of sounds. And like I say, you'll find this all over Def Leppard songs. So although you think this is quite a basic thing to kind of start out with, you're actually learning quite a lot. And when you come across these chords again in other Def Leppard songs, it's going to help your muscle memory, because you'll be like, well, I've played this before. This doesn't seem so hard. So what's always struck me about this song, and quite a lot of High and Dry in general, is the amount of different like riffs and progressions you get in them. And it's not strictly like, you know, it's not like it's verse, pre-chorus, chorus, solo all the time, you know, kind of predictable stuff. There's a lot more kind of musical elements in there, and it just kind of makes you wonder, like, how were they written and why were they written? It just seems quite unconventional in a way. So I thought for an analysis, it'd be kind of cool to look into like the song structure and just maybe put some theories on where these parts come from and why they're there, what kind of impact they have. So if we look at the structure of Let It Go, we have the intro, which I've also labeled as like progression B, because it's the chorus progression. And if I stick to Steve's terminology as the verse being progression A, then progression B, the chorus, is the same for the intro. So, you know, the intro progression and so forth. So that's the intro. Then we're into the verses like we've shown in the beginner's tutorial. Then we're back into the chorus progression again. So we do like A, B, and then A, B. And then after that second B section, we have the first bridge, which is this one here. Then we go into section C, which is my favorite kind of riff. Then we have bridge 2, which is this progression here. We're back into that section C, and then that leads us into the solo. Now what's cool about the solo is the first half is just over that chorus progression. Then the second half, which is labelled as section D, it's modulated, but what's funny is that the rhythm guitar is just kind of playing a variation of the main riff. It's like... but what Steve does going into the solo, he plays this kind of progression. It's like... What's kind of cool about that is that's basically it's the same like chord sequence as the A section A progression. It's just, you know, you could sing the verse lyrics over these chords. You know, so it's not as though that's just like a random progression. It's like it's got it's got its roots back in the section A, which I thought was pretty cool. And of course, after the solo, we're doing another verse, another chorus, and then we have the outro. So for me, the real genius in the song actually lies in those two bridge progressions. And it's not because of what's in those progressions, it's because of what follows them. Without them slowing the song down and giving us that little breather, I don't think section C would have the same impact. I've always really loved that section C riff, and I think it's only now I've realised that it's partly because of the build up those two bridge sections have before. You know, if you just to go into that section C from the chorus, it wouldn't sound as good, you know, it'd be something like you know, it doesn't necessarily sound like wrong, but it doesn't have that kind of same impact. So I kind of regard that writing as like very, very accomplished arranging. And it kind of made me think, like, you know, I wonder how much of that was due to Mutt, like if he was helping out with the dynamics and the arrangement of the songs. So I thought, oh, well, we know this song used to be called When the Rain Falls. Let's have a listen to that and see what that sounds like. And actually, it was pretty much all there anyway, which is cool. So if I was to kind of lay out the structure of When the Rain Falls, you see how it differs, but all the sections are there. And I'll put a link on where you can hear a version of When the Rain Falls. But we kind of start with the intro. It's a slightly different intro, but it's over the same chorus progression. Then we have A, B, A. But then instead of going into the second chorus, we go into bridge 1, which kind of acts like a chorus because they don't sing over the B section. Then we go into B, and then A, and then bridge 2, and then we go into C, bridge 2 again, into C, solo, back to A, then we go into bridge 1 again, because that's kind of like our chorus in this version, B, and then the outro. You know, I think Matt just probably wanted to help tighten things up with the song, but, you know, you can see all the sections are there already, and he just made it a bit more refined, a little bit more commercial, you know, as well as getting Joe to change the lyrics. I think he just helped the arrangement just a little bit more, and he helped utilise section C in becoming like a really impactful part of the song, which I'm of course thankful for. Okay, so for the intermediates, I think we should look at that great section C riff. Now in the cover I did years ago, I played that part different. But looking more closely at the original video, I think this is how it's played, so something like... I think the main challenging part of this is to make the little lick up here kind of flowing. That might take a bit of time to get your fingers used to that. But one thing you should always look out for when you're like trying to learn stuff like this, and let's say you don't have the like a video for like reference purposes, when you hear the notes, just see if you can arrange them in a way where it is like a chord, you know. So this kind of section here is like an open D chord for this little, it's like a G major, sus4, then a G major triad. So instead of thinking, well, I've got to pick every note, so I have to like finger everything differently, like, you know, try and get in a position where it is like a chord shape. So the only movement we're doing here is I'm fingering like this, you know, first finger, 7th of the G, third finger, 8th of the B, second finger, 7th of the high E. Then I bring my pinky in for the 8th of the high E, and that's the only thing that moves in this little riff. Then for the next part, it's still kind of like, you know, your major triad shape there, but because it comes by quite quick, you do have to, it's not like you can just hold a chord shape there, you know, you have to kind of move your fingers about. So that's maybe the main challenging part, I think, there. As we move down the little lick, you know, for me, I think that how that works best. I like to try and use my pinky as much as possible these days. So I use it a lot for these kind of power chord shapes instead of using my third finger there. I feel it just makes my hand rest a bit easier, especially if I'm playing sitting down. So because I use my pinky for that, I use my pinky for this little pattern here, the 3-5-3 or 5-3-5. So because of that, when I move up to the 3 of the D string, I use a slide to get down to do the rest of the lick there. You know? So I think that's a good riff for intermediates. I'm not going to go over too much about certain techniques, but it's something to work on that would help with different chord voicings. You know, we're doing that kind of major shape here, and we're moving quite quickly between the frets here. You want to make sure you have an accurate pick in hand also. So give that one a go. So for a final bit of analysis, I just want to touch on section C just once more. There's something about it which is, it's always been my favourite part of the song. So this time I just want to look a little bit more closely to the musical theory aspect of it. Just have a look at the notes and see if there's a specific reason why this has always been so pleasing to my ears. If we look at the song as a whole, the kind of main riff, the verse, the chorus, it's all centered around like an A minor sound. Now, like a typical rock song, it doesn't give too many notes away in terms of exactly what kind of key it's in. It's given us a minor sound, and we can play a minor pentatonic over it, and it sounds fine. But really, there's certain notes we're not hitting, and this goes for all the guitar parts and all the vocal parts. It purposely does not hit like either an F or an F sharp, which would determine whether it's Aeolian, like A Aeolian or A Dorian. These are two modes which are both minor modes, but they both give a different sound. Now you naturally want to fall back and say, well, it would more likely be Aeolian, because that's like your more common minor sound. Dorian is kind of like, it's less common. But what's funny is that F sharp appears in the main riff, and that would suggest that it's an A Dorian. But of course we don't get this feel because we're only on it for like just for the little bend. And even then, the main note we're hearing there is the B above it. The F sharp below just gives it the kind of chord feel, reinforces it. But all throughout the rest of it, it's like an A minor sound. The kind of riffs and licks and the solos, they're played over a kind of A minor pentatonic. We do have a B note in there, which gives us a bit more colour, but it doesn't really give too much away. Get to section C, and we modulate to a D minor sound. And you think, well, this is fair enough in rock, a lot of the times, if you are going to modulate, that's a good modulation, we're going up a fourth. So it's like, oh, this is cool. But then straight away, so we hit that D, it's just a D power chord. So there's no major or minor feel in this chord alone. It's just a root, a fifth, and then the octave above. Next chord after that, F major. So, already we have now been given like a proper major triad in the second chord. And this is like, to put it in terms of like a visual aspect, this is like an explosion of colour, what's coming up in these like 2 or 3 chords here. This is like Skittles. We are now tasting the rainbow. We've been in a little bit of like grey with like everything else. We suddenly get to section C, and it's almost like an explosion of colour because we have more melody, we have more musical like notes in there which tell us like, oh, this is how it sounds. So we go to the D, we go to an F major. But what the bass does underneath, the bass stays on the D. So what we actually get there, by the time the guitar hits the F major, is we get a D minor 7 sound. So this is already like, whoa, man, this is cool. This is like, it's a rainbow. Next chord, like a G sus4, then like a G major triad. So we've gone through the whole song, just playing pretty much like power chord shapes with no kind of major minor sound. Although we're getting the minor sound because we're hitting like in the progression, because we're going from like an A to like a C. That gives us the minor. It's like the minor interval. But we're not necessarily playing the minor notes in those chords. But here, D, D minor 7 sound, then we have a G major. Now just these three chords together, this gives us a D Dorian kind of mode or tonality, and which is funny because, like I said, it wasn't very common. It's something I didn't want to like hear in the verse and chorus progressions, but that's kind of what it's telling us here. But before we can actually come to that conclusion and say, oh, those are the notes we're hearing, we then get a D major after that G major. So, I mean, I don't want to like go too far down the rabbit hole of like music theory because one, it's hard to explain, and two, sometimes I don't know if I even know what I'm talking about. But all I want to try and get across here is that, like I said, we're kind of playing the usual rock stuff. You know, it's not really telling us like it's not as colourful, but it's just, you know, it's heavy sounding chords, which is fine. And then suddenly we get in this section here where we're playing more sophisticated chords, and not only that, we're going outside the scale degree by, you know, going into, you know, we're in a key where it's D minor is the sound, you know, but then we have a D major triad here. Then the second half of that, you know, lick, that's going back to like a D minor sound because we're using the F in there, which creates that D minor interval. It's these little things which I'm not sure how much we realize it like consciously, but it's like it breaks the rules, so it kind of makes our ears like prick up a little bit. We're like, oh, that's a bit different, but it's not done in a way where we think, oh, that sounds bad. It's like it's like breaking the rules melodically, where it makes your head turn, but for a good reason, you know. And it's like, wow, this sounds really cool, so you keep listening. Okay, so the tutorial for you advanced players out there. I thought it'd be cool to do a little bit of Steve's solo. This is kind of the second half, and it starts with like a typical Steve Clark solo lick. So let me see if I can play it. It should be something like this. Okay, so that opening lick, that's the basic of it there. I used to think it was kind of like a hammer-on thing. I like, if I was to play it like how I used to kind of play it, it'd be down here. And what's annoying is like, that took a lot of time for me to build up muscle memory when I was younger, and I found out that's probably not how he plays it, so that's redundant to me. But this is a lot easier to play, actually. You know, you got the slide in there, which kind of helps move things along. And that like gets you in the usual pentatonic shape. Got a usual kind of blues lick. Then we're sliding all the way up, which is maybe one of the trickier parts of the solo. Not actually anything playing wise, it's just making sure you get to your next destination up the fretboard. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this in-depth look. Maybe just say a couple of things about the song, like my opinion on it. It's not my favourite of High and Dry. It's probably Lady Strange or Mirror Mirror, but it could be my third favourite. Lyrically, I've never really thought about it, because I don't really process lyrics. I hear them as like syllables rather than like what the words are. And I only really realised what the lyrics were when I saw the Dortmund performance, you know, from the Pyromania tour. Joe does a couple of hand gestures, and it's like, oh, so that's what the song's about, and it really makes sense now. I'm not going to say what it's about. I'm sure you can figure out yourself. So is there anything else about this song that I found while looking into it? Actually, yes, there's one more thing. It's very, very minimal, but it's cool nonetheless for me. So the main riff, you've got two different endings for it. You've got one which goes like this. You know, and then you've got the other one. It's kind of straighter ending and doesn't have the little flick. So the one with the kind of flick, it's mostly always followed by that high note. It's an A note. Then the one without the flick is always followed by the D chord. However, on the intro, there's one instance, I'm sure it's the only instance out of the song, where they do the flick and the guitars play the D chord, but Rick, so Sav with the bass underneath, plays the A note. I'm pretty sure this is only on the record because I listened to a lot of different live versions and they always play instead of. So it makes me wonder, you know, why is there one difference on the record and it's only in the intro? And yeah, that's pretty much it. Anyway, if you found anything interesting in the song that I've missed, then let me know. And let me know if this is something you want to see more of. Well, I'm going to be doing more anyway, but if there's anything more I can add into these videos, and I'll try my best to do that. Thanks.